What's up, everybody? TJ here. Real quick before we get started with the episode, I'm testing out a new feature called Fan Mail, which is where you can actually text me from the episode that you're listening to. So as you're listening to this, go over to the episode description, and right there at the beginning, you're going to see some text that says, send me a text message. Go ahead, click that. Let me know what you think about the podcast so far. Let me know of any questions, concerns, anything you might have. I love to hear from you. So go ahead, hit that up. I'm excited to read your text, and let's get started with the episode. Hey guys, before we dive into this episode, I wanted to make sure you knew about our Patreon community. This is an online community where we help you grow into a tougher, faster, more aggressive firefighter with specific action plans designed to make you more resilient and well-rounded. The awesome thing about this community is that as soon as you join, we'll set you up with exactly what you need to grow as a firefighter. You'll get a workout every day that you can do with your crew or by yourself. We'll have a weekly growth mindset meditation to make sure your mind is ready for the strains of the job. And you can use our recovery exercises to take care of your body to make sure you have a long fire service career. We've been able to create amazing success for our members, like our friend Connor, who beat all his PRs in less than a month while still maintaining a strong cardio base. Or Ethan, who's gained a new perspective on the fire service while finishing his probationary period. And members like Chris, who learn a better way to balance work and life outside the firehouse. To check out the membership and learn more, head over to joinkeepthepromise.com. Again, that's joinkeepthepromise.com. And as a podcast listener, we have a special offer for you. When you sign up for a yearly membership, you get 2 months free. That's actually the maximum Patreon allows me to give you for free. So have at it. I can't wait to see you there. Now let's jump into the episode.
This is our story. I come from a background of having my own struggles, recognizing that I can do hard shit and figure it out and take care of my brain. And I want to give you skills to be able to do that. And now I'm married to Dave, who brain's super fucked, just like all of yours is. Sorry to tell you, but that's the truth. And we have built a process around how we take care of that. We're here because we don't want anybody to die, and we don't want anybody to think that they don't have resources to take care of their brains.
Welcome to the Keep the Promise podcast, where we help build resilient and well-rounded firefighters.
Well, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Keep the Promise podcast. I'm your host, TJ. And like I was just talking to my wonderful guest, normally I have these witty intros, but we're just going to skip it today because she is full of incredible stories that are going to benefit all of us in the fire service. And nothing I say will do justice to the stuff that we're going to cover. So joining me live from wonderful Colorado, Sammy Freyta. Sammy, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm super pumped. This is awesome.
Yeah. How are things over in the beautiful Rocky Mountains?
They're a little smoky right now. Like it's hazy outside.
Oh, that's right. You guys are on fire, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, it's coming from Canada, the smoke.
Oh.
Yeah.
That far down.
Yes. Which is kind of interesting. But, so it's not great outside today. But usually it's sunny and beautiful. I mean, I can't even lie. We usually have great weather, but it's super humid and foggy, but otherwise.
I don't want to hear about humidity. We are in Maryland.
Yeah,
and we're dying of humidity. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. It's not that bad. It's great. I'm just kidding. It's awesome outside. You should come.
I mean, I'm going to say less because I'm a big fan of Colorado. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Start with, well, you're a transplant, right?
I am.
You're
yes.
not originally.
I'm
so
not
let's
an
go
OG.
back. You're not an OG.
Mm-mm.
Where'd you start? Take us through the journey.
Oh gosh. I grew up in Chicago, not Chicago. Everybody, says you can't say that unless you live downtown. But so it was a northwest suburb.
Okay.
Was there pretty much all of my life through high school, through college. And then I moved to Colorado in 2016, I believe. So, grew up in a northwest suburb of the city, went to school, got my master's downtown in Chicago and lived in the city for about 10 years before I moved out here.
What'd you study?
Well, I started studying broadcast journalism and political science because, that makes sense somehow. So those are my degrees in college. And then I hated that. And I ended up going back to school to get my master's in counseling psychology / art therapy. So it was a dual degree, where I learned how to counsel somebody, do psychology, but then we also paired it with how you would incorporate art into sessions. So it was like a dual master's program.
Why the sudden change?
No, I mean, all of it makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, we haven't even told anyone what you actually do. We're just telling your life story. So
yeah,
you ended up in the mental health world after starting off far, far away from it.
Totally far.
What the hell happened?
I thought I wanted to be work for TV. So I did a lot of like anchoring and working for production companies for a couple of years. And potentially wanted to do sports TV. But yeah, that totally changed. As soon as I got out of college, I really, sort of hated the industry. There was a lot of stress involved for nothing, like, high stakes over silly things that I felt. So I started getting really, really anxious and stressed out about all of that. And I didn't have some very great bosses at the time either. And I was going through my own personal struggles, which didn't pair well with the high intensity job that I was in. So basically, through my own trials and tribulations, I decided to go back to school and do what I wanted to do and what helped me, which was counseling and therapy. So it was really a kind of a huge pivot, but it was after I had got out of an outpatient program for an eating disorder. So I had some pretty low self-esteem, was struggling a ton with a past relationship that was abusive. And once I got out of therapy or an outpatient service, I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm going to go back and tell people how awesome they are and pump them up for over nothing. Like, it felt so superficial. And so, yeah, I went home and I told my sister and my family, I'm like, I'm going to go back to school and be a therapist. So, and that's how it all started. But I was old. Like, when I went back, I was one of the oldest people in my program because they were just coming right out of college to get their master's. So that was a little weird experience for me, being the old woman in the room.
I mean, it had to have helped at least because you already come with life experience on both sides, right? You're coming into it, approaching it from like the therapist point of view, but also you have been.
But I was fucked up. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and we'll get to that because that's one of the things that I admire the most. You're very open about the fact that, hey, we're broken too. And you're coming into it in a very vulnerable way. Okay. So you got those dual masters, art therapy, huh? Mm-hmm. How does art fit into therapy world?
It's interesting because I never obviously envisioned that's how my life would go. And I was never an artist. I was always a creative kid. But in my program, my outpatient program, there was an art therapist and we had to do that as part of our healing process. And that's really when my mind changed around it. And I had opened up before because I was pretty abstinent about telling people anything in the program. I was like, I'm fucking fine. You guys are all the ones who are fucked up, not me. It's not me. I mean, there were people in there. I don't even want to say women because it was men too, but like they couldn't even eat a cracker, and I was coming in there from a totally different perspective. I mean, I was using food to cope with my emotions, but it was more of a restriction and how I wanted to look and how I thought I could build my self-esteem up. So I was pretty fast to be like, I can fix this, I can fix the food part. So I just didn't think anything was wrong with me at all. And then this art therapist just opened me wide up. And so that was the moment that I realized that therapy doesn't have to be, oh my gosh. Sorry. My dog just pulled our little light down. So
good job, dog.
Siren. Yeah. So she just kind of opened my eyes up to recognize that there was life outside of, just sitting down and telling somebody your story, that there was a lot more you could get out of somebody by being creative. And, that's when I realized that maybe this was a route that I wanted to go down, is how can you get closer to somebody by understanding what's really inside of their thoughts and their brain by using the creative process. And so I went home and bought a bunch of oil paints and started painting. And I kind of fell in love with the process. I was not an artist by any means, but just used it as a way to express myself and to get stuff out. And so then, I really learned that I think more, not just that art is a way to, to get different places with people, but that therapy doesn't have to be so black and white. I think that art piece was what propelled me on this journey of understanding that therapy can be utilized in so many different ways. And it doesn't have to be me sitting across the table or the couch from you and you telling me something and me nodding my head and saying, oh, okay, sounds good. How does it make you feel? And so I really think that art process was the first indicator to get me to a more unprofessional place of therapy. I like to say an unprofessional professional.
Something that I really want to dig into. But before we go into the unprofessional professional, what sort of, so the creative process, is it just painting or what else? Because, we're like 9 minutes in and our listeners are probably going like, who the fuck is she? What are we talking about? I want to build that stage as to how this helps responders, because so many of us are averse to sitting on the couch across from the therapist being like, my feelings, okay, how else does that make you feel?
Sure.
Without realizing that a lot of our hobbies and a lot of things that we do can be therapy, can be a very therapeutic outlet for the stuff that we deal with on the job and off the job. So what else, other than painting, which is what you do, what else can be that creative process for art therapy?
It actually doesn't have to be something so specific, right? So it's just utilizing a tool in therapy to help you expand your thoughts beyond talking. So a lot of, particularly for our communities that we're talking about, trauma memories, trauma thoughts stored in your body. We know this, like the issues are in the tissues, but also they're stored in a place in your brain that sometimes there's no verbal response or a verbal understanding. So we can't just explain this is what happened. We can go through the motions like a hot wash or, a debrief and say, this is what happened. This is what I saw. There's the guy's brains on the floor, but we're not tackling it from an emotional perspective. We're tackling from logistical perspective, and we're not pairing how we feel, how our body feels with what happened. Those things get separated when we go into a traumatic event, right? Those things totally break inside of our brains. Our brains try to protect us from going there. And art or creation actually is a way to pair those processes and synapses back together. So it can be very helpful with responders who are particularly not interested in telling a story about what they saw or did for the 100th time, or going back to that space. It's almost like a safe way to go back there. And it helps open up a whole emotive side of them that they might be completely uninterested in going. It not like it's a trick, but it kind of can be a way to trick
like a
them.
life hack.
Yes. Yeah. So in, specifically, I've utilized it with different responders, not only to revisit something traumatic that's stuck, that's kind of, coming up for them in different ways, but also to help them re-engage with their emotional connection to themselves and to their partners and their people. Because a lot of times that's just completely shut off as self-protection. So art can be a way to engage, and it doesn't have to be painting. It can be writing. It can be, drawing. It can be, I have a whole, chest in my room. It can be some people like to cut things out, use collage. I've done masks with responders. It can even be as simple as a Sharpie and a piece of paper. It's just a way to connect both parts of the brain.
I do leather work. A lot of people know me. I started on TJ Leather making helmet shields and whatnot. And quite often just the very repetitive act of tooling a piece of leather or stitching or painting, whatever, you get in that space where you're moving, you're doing stuff, you're creating. And somehow the thoughts just kind of like a cloud passing by a mountain. They just come and go. And you revisit them. Hey, I remember this happened. And then it just keeps going and it just keeps going. It's kind of, it is therapeutic in a way.
And it's empowering, right? Like to give somebody
is.
an ability or a skill to do something and to work through something that's using your hands and your brain. And it can be a way for people to take more ownership over what they've been through. Instead of that happened to me and I'm good and I never want to, go back there. This is now I've understood what happened. I've given it space and now I can move the fuck on from it. Like we don't have to live there forever, right? Like that's not the point.
It's not healthy. It is not healthy at all.
No.
So you curse just like the rest of us. You speak our language. You kind of know us. You're involved with first responders, right? Tell us some more.
Okay. Well, I've been a therapist since 2013. Is when I decided to go back to school to do this. But over the last maybe 6 or 7 years, my focus has really been on working with responders and the military families, military individuals. Prior to that, my experiences I was specifically training in trauma. Like I wanted to understand trauma. I wanted to understand, when people go through it, what to do with that. So I was working with victims at first. And then my dad was always a really big proponent of our responders and people who take care of us. And him and my mom always kind of modeled that for me. Like there are people, they care for us and we need to care for them. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And my dad was always kind of pushing me like, when are you going to take classes about, learning more about working with them? When's that going to happen? Kind of as I started my therapy program. And so I knew I wanted to do that, but I knew I needed to get the basics down first. And so once I moved to Colorado, I started taking classes to learn how to particularly understand and work with responders. And then it sort of snowballed from there into the company that I run now, which is individual therapy and coaching, but also on site. So I work on site with departments all over the Denver metro area and some in the mountains. And I sound and speak like you because I grew up in Chicago and my dad I was his little tomboy for most of my life. And that was just how we are. We're harsh, but we're community oriented. And I think that always fit this dynamic, I guess, in the responder world. So that's always been a part of me. But I think I maybe show up that way because not only that's who I am, but that's how you guys are. So it was like this perfect match. Like I remember I always wanted to be like this in sessions with people, but I had to be a little bit more kosher or watch my words. And then when I started working with responders, I was like, oh, these are my people. Like now I can just be myself all the time. So I feel like it's a little bit of both, the community was already there and I was similar to that, but then I realized that I could join forces. And then somewhere along the line, I married a firefighter. So I don't know which one happened first, but now I am you guys because, you're literally my family.
Yeah, I was going to say, you made comment like the perfect match. It was, these are my people. I'm like, yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And you work pretty closely with your husband in not as a firefighter, but in the mental health world, right?
Yes. Yes. So Dave my husband is a firefighter. He's been doing it since, his daughter was born. So almost 15 years now. He's an engineer. And once we got together, slowly over time, we started to realize like that joining forces with each other was actually really helpful for the community because I had the clinical background perspective and he had the real life experience. So got a lot more, I would say, rapport from that and guys and gals had more of an inkling to trust me or want to get to know me because I was them. And I wasn't just this clinician who was like, oh, I'm going to fix all your problems for you. But, so Dave does come with me when he's not on shift and helps me out. And we kind of tag team and do our little mental fitness sessions with the responder departments together. And then we also bring our dog Siren, who's a 1.5 years, and she's a therapy dog, but she's not quite a therapy dog yet because she's still a little asshole. But she comes with us everywhere. So it's pretty much the three of us when we're all home and able.
The dog who just pulled down whatever
she
did.
Just ran through the light and pulled it down.
Hey friends, I want to take a quick moment to ask you to support the show by leaving a rating and a review on your favorite platform. Your support means the world to us, and it helps spread the message to even more people. We've gotten thousands and thousands of listeners, and those high ratings help our show become more discoverable, allowing us to reach even more listeners and make an even greater impact. So, if you've enjoyed what you heard so far, please take a moment to leave a rating and a review. It only takes a few seconds, and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the show. Well done. I mean, there's something to be said about coming in with somebody within the community, because we traditionally are so closed off to any sort of outside help. I mean, I started volunteering in 2005, and I remember having traumatizing calls. I was a kid. I was 18. Some dude pulled him out of a car wreck, and his brains ended up spilling all over my hands. So I was like, whoa, this is what brains look and feel like? And the amount of debrief that we got was like, hey man, you okay? Like, talk to somebody if you need to, if it's bothering you. And that was it, because back then, and even 9 years later when I started therapy, the thought of putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, say, hey, I'm talking to somebody, it was unheard of. It was, you were going to be a pariah. You were going to be ostracized. You were going to be unfit for duty. I remember I used like different email addresses when I signed up for therapy. I barely told anyone on my shift, like, they're going to find out. They're going to pull me off the floor. Fuck, this is going to be awful. And even though the landscape has changed dramatically since then, for the better, we still encounter that resistance of people who feel that a bottle of whiskey is a better therapist, or who feel that bottling it up works way better. So having somebody in the community that can come in and say, hello, this is me. This is what I've been through, and these are my experiences with getting help, kind of lowers everyone's guard, right? You too must have experienced that at least once, if not more, coming in, and once Dave starts talking, being like, hey, this is who I am, they're like, okay, now we're going to open up.
Yes. And I think that's actually how we got to where we are, is how we went from me being a therapist, working with responders in individual therapy, working with the peer support teams and being like the clinical lead, to building this dynamic where now we're literally on site with the departments. We come in, we hang out, we sit at the kitchen table. Sometimes we have something to talk about. Sometimes we just bullshit. Sometimes we, have a topic, or somebody asks us to talk about something. We've gotten there because with our peer teams, right? That's kind of how we broke into this dynamic. Was we sat down and we said, the reason why we want to be your clinical lead is because this is our story, right? Like, I come from a background of having my own struggles, going to therapy, recognizing that I can do hard shit and figure it out and take care of my brain. And I want to give you skills to be able to do that. And now I'm married to Dave, whose brain's super fucked, just like all of yours is. Sorry to tell you, but that's the truth. And we have built a process around how we take care of that. His story is pretty traumatic. The things that he's gone through are very traumatic. And we say that right off the bat. And we're like, so we're not here because we get paid a lot of money to do this and we think we're awesome. We're here because we don't want anybody to die, and we don't want anybody to think that they don't have resources to take care of their brains. And it doesn't have to be formal therapy where you're sitting down and talking about your feelings. This is we can build mental fortitude around relationships and talking about things and being open and vulnerable. And we model that by saying that right off the bat. This is who we are, and the only reason why we're here is because we want to love you. That's it.
So I want to get back to the peer team and get you riled up, as I tend to do with people, about the whole peer team versus system. But how do you guys approach these groups? Like, I'm very interested in that opening volley almost of vulnerability, of breaking that ice, like dealing with the elephant in the room with like, oh, an outsider, talk about mental health. This is bullshit. How do you approach it? Because
we will get value out of it. Somebody listening to this will be able to understand, like, okay, this can be helpful. And I'm with particular emphasis on the mental fortitude, not just mental health, the buzzword therapy, but I think fortitude is a much better way to explain it.
Yeah, we've actually started saying fitness, like mental fitness, instead of therapy. And we actually say that we're coaches because I've had to break all those boundaries down and now become their friend, their family member, their person who loves them. I don't even like to say that I'm a therapist because it immediately puts me in a box that I can't get out of, right? And so we approach it like we are a first responder family. We have been through extensive amount of trauma. We have problems similarly to your problems. We always say everybody has very, very different lives in our communities. Like, right, we're all experiencing different things. We're going through different things. We can't compare that. But what we do know by working with you guys all so much is that everybody has the same problems. Like, they're just different, versions of the same problems. And so if we can start with it, telling you that we have problems, then we hope that you can understand that our problems don't stop us from living and doing our jobs and showing up and going on calls and taking care of our family. But we have to build processes around how we are taking care of our brains and our bodies so that we can do those things. So it's really just trying to break down the stigma that mental health means that you're sick or there's something wrong. Mental health is about being healthy and taking care of your brain. And so we just kind of frame it like that. Like we say this a lot, you go to the doctor when you hurt yourself. Why don't you take care of your brain when it hurts or whatever? But that's the basic concept. And I just think that framing it like it's not wrong, it's going to make you better at your job, it's going to make you better with your family, is helpful, especially in these communities, because a lot of us are, we want to be the best at things. We want to be good at the job. And so we say, well, you're missing a part of being good at the job. You can only do so much with your training and skills on calls. What about what's behind all that? It's your brain. So why aren't we talking about that stuff? Why aren't we teaching you ways to cope in positive ways to communicate with each other when things aren't right, ways to have meaningful conversations that don't mean you're not fit for duty, and that's the way that we frame it. I mean, and it takes a little bit of time to build those relationships, but approaching it that way, what we've seen is that there isn't many walls to break down because we break them down right away.
You guys basically come in like the Kool-Aid man. You're
yes,
like, oh yeah, through
pretty
the wall.
much. Well, and something we've also realized is if that doesn't work for the team, then we probably shouldn't be on their team, right? They can find another group or company that's going to work with them in the way that they want it seen. But I don't want to toot our horns, but we haven't really seen much of that because everybody wants to break the walls down. They just don't know it. So if we start, they're like, oh, okay. And then they're in.
One of us.
Yeah.
No, it's important to get that, to be able to relate to the community. Because we, like you said, we're all fucked up. We all suffer from an immense amount of trauma. And it feels so alienating not being able to deal with it as most normal people would, because we're not supposed to. We are strong. We are invincible. We are firefighters. We get called when people have the worst day of their lives, so we cannot have bad days. And I think coming in and Kool-Aid manning your way through a wall, it opens that door for people to just be like, okay, maybe I can improve my fitness in terms of my mind. What are some ways? Exercise the mind. And that takes us perfectly to, you talked about different ways to cope and communicate. What are some ways that we can better cope with the trauma or communicate it or be able to maintain a strong, clear communication with our loved ones in spite of the trauma? Because from my perspective, I know that coming back from a shitty shift or coming back from a particularly draining call, better leave me alone, because I am not going to be the person that you once loved type thing. I am going to be cranky and I'm going to be nitpicky. So what are some ways that we can cope with the stuff that we see and we do to be more present and more ourselves for our loved ones off the job?
Well, I think the first step is awareness, which is what you just said, right? Like what I have to be aware of what happens to me after a long shift, or what happens to me when I don't get to sleep that night because we ran a bunch of calls, or what happens to me when I feel like I'm in a good mood and then I walk in the door and I see my kids, and even though I'm supposed to be excited, I actually don't want to be there. Like what happens? What's your process? Because once you can understand your process, then the next part is being able to communicate that to the people in your house or your friends or your family members or whoever it is that's going to come in contact with that version of you. So, we always say communication, but it's so important, but you can't communicate properly if you're unaware, right? So that first step is that awareness piece. And then it's learning, okay, so now I'm aware. Now I've spoken this to my partner. What do I need to regulate my nervous system? Like, what do I need in that moment coming off that shift or coming down that I need to do? So that's the coping to be able to bring my body back down to more of a homeostasis level. And how can I do that in, the scheme of my life in the first couple hours when I get home? And so it's building a process around that. I mean, to me, it's always process building, because we don't have any yet. We just kind of go with the flow and try to figure it out, which leads us into sometimes conflict, which leads us into, sitting in front of the TV and shutting off, which leads us into going out and having a beer, with our friends at 8 a.m. or whatever, because those are ways that will help you get to homeostasis, but in an improper and negative coping way, right? And those are going to lead into avoidance, dismissal, repression, all that stuff. So it's learning then what are some positive things that help my body feel good, because our minds and our bodies are connected. And what does that look like for me? So some of it's going to be a different, building a process. Does that mean going on a walk, and exercising? Does that mean doing breathing techniques like Joey talks about all the time from conscious movements and regulating my body back to a better and healthy place? Does that mean sitting down with my person and telling her and telling her or him about all the shit that I just saw? Some people need to do that, vent it out. Does that mean exercising? Not to the point of where you're completely burnt out, but exercising to help get some of the dopamine flowing and the serotonin levels back up. Does that mean eating healthy fats that help clear my brain fog, instead of just going for the donut or for the leftover pizza? So it can be a lot of different things, but it's learning for you and thinking about, if you're a responder out there trying to understand what this means, is what helps bring you down to a level where you feel more in control of your actions and your thoughts. What does that look like for you? That's not something that completely shuts down your thought processes, like drinking, adrenaline dumping, sitting in front of the TV, playing video games for 3 hours.
Should we involve our partners and our family in these coping processes, or should that be something that we shield them from? Because they can be chaotic and they can be damaging. Is that one thing that we ought to do it ourselves, or have them be part of it?
Well, my initial response is 100%, 1000% have them be a part of it, but that doesn't mean they are doing it with you necessarily, right? But if our partners, our family members are unaware, because our expectations of how we need to cope when we get home are not spoken to them, that's going to turn into more conflict, right? Or potentially some repression, so that you're not sharing with your family, or confusion, right? So if the responder is okay, something that I need to do is maybe go for a walk with the dog when I get home, or take a 20-minute nap because I didn't sleep last night, and they don't communicate that, well, they're unaware that that's what they're going to do, right? And then it's an unspoken thing. Then their partner's what the fuck, bro? Like I needed your help. So if there's no communication, verbal communication going on about what you need that's beneficial and appropriate for the family in that time frame, then how does anybody know what's going on? Then we just come, get into mind reading stuff, and you do this all the time when you come home, or you never tell me anything. There's a gamut of relationship issues that can come out of not being open and honest with your family. I feel like that's a whole podcast in itself.
I feel like we need a couple more episodes for that. Yeah. We'll have Dave on board for that one, and we'll make it a nice family affair.
He'll talk the whole time, though.
Perfect. That's fine. It's cool. Talk about Dave. Talk about what you guys work together with peer teams. Let's talk about the peer team concept versus the critical incident stress management. Without getting yourself in trouble. I will happily.
I'll get myself in trouble. I don't care. My chief will be mad at me.
I will happily talk about that, but
he'll back me up.
Tell me. Give me your thoughts on peer teams versus system teams.
Well, I don't know. Can I just maybe I can open it up with my weird thought about how I believe departments should work.
Go for it.
Okay.
The Utopia Fire Department. This is the fire service according to Sammy.
This is actually where I wish Dave would be here, because this is one of his favorite pastimes is to apply for chief positions all over the place that he's completely unqualified for just for fun. And so we always joke and we tell our department system, they're like, one day he's going to get a chin bump. And then what are you guys going to do? And his vision is to become a chief that he's completely unqualified for, and then call the department the Friendly Fire Brigade.
Friendly Fire Brigade.
Or Friendship Fire Brigade. That's what he wants to do. That's his envision of the department that Dave would like to run. Everybody's best friends. So
don't. I was going to say, don't hire me, because I'm going to come in with my crackhead energy and we're going to be fighting each other in no time.
He's going to be like, this is not aligned with the Friendship Fire Brigade.
Former Friendship Fire Brigade. Now we beefing.
Oh, man. So, yeah,